Yeah, and that's that mindset shift for us to try to look at it from that angle, trying to understand that their brain is under construction, that they are trying their best, that they're not doing this on purpose just to make us angry. They're not going to school to see how often can the teacher's head pop off, or can I get to the principal's office 3 times instead of 4 times today? Like, they're not doing this on purpose, but it comes across that way. Especially parents will get frustrated and it's like Tuesday and Thursday you did well and somehow on Saturday you can't figure this out. Brain is under construction. We are human, but you're so frustrated and you see such big consistent emotions or behaviors. That's why we have to get ahead of it, figure out the triggers, figure out the skills, and create some structure and a plan, because they do really well with structure and a plan. The best therapy is love. They just need to know that you're there, that you love them, and you're separating the behavior from the child.
Hello and welcome to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. We're here to help you navigate life while disrupting the status quo. Our discussions cover a number of topics relevant to everyday life. We discuss everything from relationships to entrepreneurship. We also engage in some difficult but important conversations. And now, here are your hosts, Brian and Tanya Hamilton.
Welcome to another episode of the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. Today we're going to tackle one of our favorite topics, under the parenting category, and we're joined today by Michelle McVittie. Michelle, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, our pleasure. Now, we're going to start by getting to learn a little bit more about you. So we're going to ask the loaded question: who is Michelle McVittie?
Yeah, well, Michelle McVittie is a child life specialist and parenting coach. I have over 20 years experience working in pediatric medical and mental health. And I do on-demand courses for parents, and I also do one-on-one. I specialize in ADHD, strong-willed children, anxiety, and parenting teens, because children do not come with a manual. And I do feel that parent education really can change the trajectory of your journey, and that we need to come together instead of, wait and see mentality. Let's get ahead of it. Right.
Mm-hmm. So for anybody else who's maybe wondering, a child life specialist, that's not a title that some people may hear often. So could you just explain a little bit more to us what that role is?
Of course, yes. So it's a psychosocial role for children in hospital. So very popular in America, and it's doing very well in Canada. But what it is essentially children go into hospital for mental health reasons now, as well as medical. And it's tough. It's tough on families. It's tough on children. They get traumatized. So we are there to say, hey, this is your diagnosis, or we're going to prep you for the IV start. And did you know that there's a little straw that's in your vein? The needle is gone, and it's just giving you extra medicine or water through your veins. So it goes right into your body. We prep them for surgery. We explain diagnosis. We work with parents. And I actually had a really amazing role working inpatient with eating disorders as one of the first child life specialists to get into a mental health role and support children in hospital, because it's scary to be in hospital, especially when you have extended stays. And what does that look like? We build skills, we do therapeutic play, we try to normalize their stay there and then help them transition back to home for whatever those reasons are.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. And we wanted to kind of delve into the topic of the strong-willed child.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I know that we all will know some of these, but what are some of the characteristics that define, what we call strong-willed?
Well, they are black and white thinkers, my way or the highway, usually really, really smart. So some parents would call them manipulative, very emotional as well, especially when things don't go their way. And their behavior usually runs the household. They will make great lawyers, but in the moment, we feel very frustrated, and siblings sometimes feel frustrated as well, because especially when the behavior is running the household, they feel like it's not fair that this essentially, quote unquote, bad behavior is getting attention, is getting them what they want. So it can build a lot of resentment and chaos in the home.
Okay. And it's interesting. So my work is daycare, and you often hear parents throughout the years, my toddler is strong-willed. It has a better ring to it when they're younger. It's like, okay, yeah, we'll make it work. But when you think of a child who's 10 and you're still describing them as strong-willed, it's not as, I don't know, doesn't sound as good, right? So do you feel that this title, strong-willed, is something that we can sort of guide and have kids grow out of, or I guess nurture it to a more positive characteristic?
I think it's something that is we need to nurture into a positive characteristic, because temperament is something you're born with. So you can be one of those people that is more of a homebody or super active, somebody that is moodier or just really easygoing. So when you look at temperament traits, you can develop temperament traits. I actually used to be a very shy and timid child, and my mother put me into dance class. My mom made me speak for myself and things like that. And now I am on CH Morning Live and I can speak in front of hundreds of people. I love doing this kind of stuff. Creating reels, no problem. I can do that. But it had to be developed in me. And it's the same thing with a strong-willed child. When they learn, if I push, if I scream in the candy aisle and I get my candy, then why would I change? So we have to understand that every child's temperament is different, and how we respond versus react is so important. So I will listen to you, but you need to listen to me, and then we need to work on this together. But when you have that strong-willed child and we're exhausted and we think, fine, have the candy, fine, you can go first, just let him have the purple cup.
Right.
Then the child learns this behavior is working, and there could be other skills that we need to develop as well, which we can get into. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
So I know for parents, when dealing with a child like this, it takes time and it takes patience, right? And some of those, depending on the day, as parents, we don't have. And then that's when, there is that give in, just have the purple cup, just do whatever it is you want to do.
Yeah.
So what can you suggest for parents that are dealing with this?
Well, we have to get ahead of it. Right? We tend to fight fires and we hope for a miracle. And every morning there's a struggle getting out of the door, or every morning we have, and emotions ebb and flow and behaviors ebb and flow. And some parents are like, they go from 0 to 10 and I don't know where it's coming from. Well, we have to dig a little bit deeper and try to understand that. If you are solo parenting, it is all on you, unfortunately. So having your support system can be helpful, but you have to work a little bit harder. If you are with, parenting with someone, then we want to tag team and send consistent messages as well, because children will split if they can. I know what I can get away with one parent. I know what I can get away with the other. And grandma's coming over, so I'm having brownies for breakfast, right? And they will push, right? Why not? I've got time. I can sit here and have a tantrum and get what I want for an hour. I don't have to get to school. So it's really get ahead of it, understanding our triggers and where we jump in and fix or rescue or punish or just shut down. So it's really, I don't want to put judgment on parents, but their brains are under construction until 25, possibly 30 for neurodiverse children. So it's really up to the parents to work together to understand what negotiables and non-negotiables are. And that if this behavior is running the household, we have to get ahead of it instead of just trying to do something in the moment when I'm at a 12 out of 10 and the child's at a 12 out of 10.
Okay.
Now, I want to kind of go back to the example that you gave earlier, because it's one that people definitely have a tough time navigating. But when that kid go back to the grocery store example, they want candy and they're freaking out. And, a lot of times it's just, you want to avoid some embarrassment. So you might cave in. What would you recommend as a good solution to try to navigate through that process?
Yes. Well, and I think that's the piece, is caving in is that part of your mindset. So we want to try to change some of our mindset. A lot of us were brought up with I insist parenting. Do as I say, not as I do. Very frustrating. Maybe you were that kid that would just listen, but you held on to a lot of resentment. And your brother was the one that got the candy in the candy aisle and you got nothing, because I didn't have a temper tantrum. So it's really changing that mindset. It's not a win or lose. It's about working together and setting firm but kind boundaries. And that's planning ahead, right? So again, getting ahead of it. And when we go to the store, can I be flexible here, right? Or is it just my way or the highway? And no, we're not getting this, and no, we're not getting that. And then you've got your child that is like, well, you're saying no, I'm saying no. And then we get into this battle. And where can we meet in the middle? So will I be buying cookies or will I be buying ice cream? Okay, so I'm going to let the child choose. As soon as they start asking for more, then everything will go back, right? So we have to say that to them. I'm noticing that going grocery shopping is really tough and they want something. Why not? Sometimes you give it to me, sometimes you don't. So with some children, you have to be consistent because they will hold on to that one time you said yes, right? So why not try again? And if we're going in with a plan that, yes, absolutely, you can have something. You can have something up to $5. You can have something up to $1. And sometimes you have to give a choice. You can have A or B because it's going to be a 3-hour decision for them to find that one item they want for $1. Or I'm already picking the cookies. So I'm going to give you a choice of these ones or these ones, or are you choosing? And then we're moving forward. You might take a little bit longer, but you want to plan ahead, stay consistent, repeat what the expectation is with the child and have them repeat what is the expectation, and acknowledge effort, acknowledge when they do listen. They could still be crying and being like, oh, it's not fair, but we're moving on, right? You listened, but we focus on the complaining instead of they listened.
Right.
So focus more on what you want to see more of and label that.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess it would be the same for the classroom, right? So that could be in somebody's house, 2 kids, you only have one that's dealing with this. Now, in a classroom setting for, teachers listening here, that can also be quite distracting, right? And especially if you have more than one. So would you recommend the same techniques and the same tips there?
Oh man, that's a complicated question. Okay, so let's step back a little bit. When we look at parent and teacher relationship, we want to build that relationship. When you are a teacher and you have a background in history and math, not child development, not psychology, some teachers have gotten more education. They understand it more. They may have a child with ADHD or with a learning disability, or they just get it, right? But there's a lot of pressure put on teachers that the expectation on them is to be a child psychologist, is to do this, to do that, and teach math and history, right? So I think we have to be mindful of what's going on, that sometimes teachers are feeling frustrated and are saying, this is all up to me. I'm noticing there's an issue. Maybe their approach isn't great, but they ask you and say, something's going on. Let's get to the doctor. And parents can feel judgment, right? But we have no control over what's going on outside of our home. So it's really important that we have those conversations with the teacher, and maybe not just the teacher. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's the learning resource teacher or CERT. Maybe it's the librarian or the other teacher from last year because your child did really well with that teacher. So creating that plan and then saying, what is going on in the classroom? What are the lagging skills or unsolved problems, right? And you can do the checklist on Ross Green's, website to kind of really dig a little bit deeper. But what are the expectations of the teacher and what are the expectations of the child? And are we teaching these skills outside of the home? Because yes, when you only have 2 kids, then you can offer choices. You've got more time, but you've got 30 kids. And plus I'm supposed to be teaching math and history and your child is struggling. Well, we have to put them in situations that they're going to struggle a little bit, right? So they can learn these skills. So when we put them into a classroom of 30 children, that they have these skills, that they're not waiting for an adult to do task initiation, emotional regulation, that they can prompt them, but how much of a role is this teacher able to give? Right? It's very complicated. I really don't give black and white answers because it's individual. But I think the main thing here is understanding that communication is key, having a clear path, and working on these skills outside of the home so you can transfer, and then seeing who's going to be part of my team. How is this going to happen? We all know there's a shortage of support in the schools. So how do we help our child with resiliency and skill building, understanding their triggers, and what are those cues or things that are happening in the classroom that are going to work for your child? What can they do? Right? Yeah.
Now, again, just, I know there's no real black and white answers for this, but when we think of things like, again, learning disabilities, ADHD, if we're kind of feeling like, this might be something that exists with our child, is there kind of definitive things that should really trigger you to go get an assessment or take them to go see a doctor?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So what we're looking for is when these behaviors or lagging skills or barriers are getting in the way. So when it's taking up a lot of time, when they're struggling with school, with friendships, with extracurriculars, when you're seeing it across the board, right? At home and at school, you're seeing it at extracurriculars. And I think the problem is that sometimes what I hear a lot of is, well, I want my child to get treatment, right? And if you're looking at, I don't know, let's say therapy, one, you can lead a horse to water, you cannot make them drink, right? And cognitive behavioral therapy, for example, if we're dealing with anxiety, works, but not for children that are under 7. And depending on your child, because they may have ADHD, so they're functioning 3 years behind with emotional control. So they're not really functioning as a 7-year-old, right? And then we're wanting them to go to therapy when they can't understand the concepts, where it can be really tough, right? So there's so much information out there, and then we're like, this is what I want for my child, right? And it's not a la carte. Like, you don't show up to your doctor if your child had diabetes and was like, I want this insulin, or how can we do this? Right? Like, we have those conversations. When it comes to behavior and when it comes to mental illness, it is a little more cloudy. There's a lot of information out there, a lot of opinion-based things that you see on Facebook and this and that can be difficult. Okay. It's not fact book. It is Facebook. And there's a lot of information, and some people are really good at it. So you're going to your doctor, you're saying, these are where my concerns are. You can bring things up, but understanding that there might be a wait list, that just because you're feeling like it's a concern, it's not necessarily diagnosable. So parent education is key to understanding what works with a child with ADHD will work with a child that doesn't have ADHD, but is still struggling with listening and things like that. So that piece isn't going to hurt, but is it getting in the way? How much time is it taking up? And that's really, you can go to your doctor for that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because, sometimes I'm just thinking for our son who was diagnosed with ADHD, he was younger, and I coming from a social work background, I'm like, okay, seeing some things just, in his busyness at the time as a toddler, and the doctor's like, no, that's typical boy. But then later on, when we finally did take him, it actually was no longer that busyness and, like, let's say the hyper piece, it was the other parts of ADHD that we were seeing the concerns, right?
Yeah.
So it is interesting, when you start looking at it. And I guess on that note, let's, look at ADHD. And I think it would be important for you to explain, like, or helpful, sorry, the understanding ADHD and everything that entails.
Yeah. You're giving me complicated questions. You're really testing me. Does she know what she's talking about? How much time do we have? So ADHD, yes. ADHD is, so there's 3 different types of ADHD. And normally we're not diagnosing children until they're in grade 1 because we want to see how they do with focus, sitting still. And again, we want to see behaviors like that hyperactivity, the lack of focus, for more than 6 months in 2 different locations. So it has to be happening at home and at school. Right? Sometimes children will mask their symptoms at school, so teachers are not aware of it, especially with inattentive subtype, where that is more, that used to be called ADD. Now it's called inattentive subtype. So there's ADHD, hyperactivity, ADHD, inattentive subtype, or combined type, which they're struggling with focus and impulsivity. And then the other thing is that they don't put in the DSM because it's not measurable, is they're hypersensitive, they're emotional. And that emotional control is behind. So their executive functions are up to 3 years behind, such as task initiation, emotional control, impulsivity, prioritizing, time management, social skills, like the things that help us through life. Our children are struggling with. And at a young age, they don't get it. And then as they start getting older, there's other things going on. They can notice I'm different, or I get in trouble all the time. My sister gets it. I don't. What's the matter with me? And so with a lot of mental illness, there's comorbidity, which means more than one mental illness. And anxiety is one of those ones that ADHD and anxiety go together. ADHD and autism also go together. So you're usually not dealing with one thing, but you have a 4-year-old and you're trying to figure all this out. And you're not able to do a lot of those assessments too early, right?
So again, you kind of mentioned one of the pieces being with the emotional piece or the impulsivity functioning kind of at up to 3 years behind. So that being said, is that, I guess, something that they could grow out of? Because eventually you get to a point where you should be functioning at an adult level.
Yeah.
So is that, am I kind of reasonable with my thinking there?
Well, I would say, so growing out of ADHD, there is a small percentage that do grow out of it. Majority of people will have it into adulthood. The thing is that we want to build those skills, and building resiliency is really important. Understanding your child is behind, so it's going to take them longer to get there. So they're not really functioning like a 16-year-old, right? They're more like a 13-year-old. They could be really intelligent and be like a 20-year-old, but they can't get out of the house on time. And that can be frustrating. So there's so many different facets to it. And having parents that understand them, having the systems put in place instead of everybody just doing everything for them, where we're putting a structure and system in place, and then we're going to let you try. And then we're going to let you take the next step and the next step. Because if these things aren't dealt with, it's not like, well, my brain now is 30, so we're good. Adults into adulthood struggle with relationships because it wasn't something that was kind of built up when they were younger. And sometimes they just struggle because of the ADHD. Now, Justin Timberlake has ADHD. I think he's doing very well in life, So, there's lots of hockey players and sports, like professional sports people that have ADHD. They are those kids that are go, go, go. So it's not like you have ADHD and so you can't do well in life. It's not like you're a strong-willed child and that's it. No, you're going to be a great lawyer. You're going to be a great athlete. You're going to be super motivated and like fun to be around. But we have to teach the skills, because if all they know is pushing back, or all they know is I'll just do it this way and eventually my mom's going to clean my room, or she's going to drive me to work because I'm late every day, that's not going to work. Right. So again, I can never give you a black and white answer, and I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. That's it's not a black and white subject.
No, it is not. It is
no,
not.
Definitely not.
No.
And I think, for parents, it's learning, right? So you get that diagnosis, or you start that process, and, it's figuring out what your child needs. Because again, everyone who has ADHD, it's going to look different. Right. Yeah. And I was saying I listened to your webinar, which plug, it was really, really helpful. And I listened while I was cleaning and I had to stop
Yeah.
and write some notes down. But
Good.
you talked about the boy and he was in the hot tub and his friend came and started touching all the buttons, but
Yeah.
he's not allowed to touch the buttons.
Yeah.
Right. So then it was almost like he was focused on the fact that this boy wasn't listening, but mom has already told me this rule. Why doesn't he have to follow?
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
So, just parenting around all this type of stuff is
Yes.
challenging.
It is challenging. And I think in that moment, the mom was like, don't worry about it. And it's like, but I have to worry about it on days that I'm here by myself and not today. Like, this is confusing. Right. And that piece of, well, this is important. So why are you saying it's not important right now? So this is an injustice. So understanding triggers. So whether you're dealing with ADHD, a strong-willed child, they usually go hand in hand, but understanding they're black and white thinkers, and we have to throw a lot of gray at them. We have to help them see their self-awareness. And this happens with strong-willed children as well, where they can't see outside of themselves, right? It's just, this is the way that I see it. So we actually have to push them outside of their comfort zone a little bit with saying, yeah, so I like this and you like that. So are you saying that because I like this, that my opinion is not okay? Because I don't actually agree with your opinion. But we do it in a way that's friendly and fun. And we can have interviews or topics that we would put in a bowl. And what would you do with $1 million? Right. And maybe, your child is like chocolate bars all the way. Wow. Like, you're going to use $1 million on just chocolate bars? Okay. I would do this. I'd go to Hawaii. I'd get my hair done. I'd, whatever. Maybe another kid is like, oh, I'd buy the car. I'd buy the big car, like the Lamborghini or whatever. And let's talk about that. And everybody is allowed to have a different opinion, right? But those are the skills you want to be building and practicing, because when they're in that push and pull and we're just doing the win or lose, it's not helpful. Whether your child has ADHD, whether you've got a strong-willed child, that black and white thinker, that rigid thinking, we have to throw more gray at them, but it's more work for us now. But in the long run, you're building these skills, because if at home, let them have the purple cup. Fine. Yes, absolutely. Mario Kart's the best game. Absolutely. Whatever. Whatever they want, I'll do it for you. Fine. You can have the tablet because you're going to have a meltdown if you don't. And then they go into the world, and the world is not black and white. The world is like, this is my chair. Get out of here. The world is like, no, I'm doing it my way. And your child is stuck. Where do they learn these skills? At home with us, in gentle, progressive, consistent ways, noticing effort, noticing those small degrees of change.
Mm-hmm. And I think as parents, you said, we know this. We know to not try to introduce this stuff when the child is having a meltdown or the child is arguing because you let the friend touch the buttons in the hot tub, right? And just that reminder that as parents, we really should be having these conversations when things are calm, when, we have our child's full focus and attention, right?
Yes. And I just talked about this with a client today. And when you're exhausted, when you are in burnout mode, we are just surviving and not thriving. We got through the day. Everybody's alive. One arm maybe not attached, but we got through the day, right? And then we think, I don't want to sit down and sit with this kid and be like, what's going on? Help me understand. I don't know. Or lying or not participating. So we are in survival mode and we want to be thriving, right? And shifting from burnout to dealing with things when you have a child that isn't listening, that isn't really getting it, can be frustrating and defeating. So then we think, what's the point? Then that's when we rescue. That's when we punish. And punishment doesn't teach anything. It doesn't teach skills. And then you have the same issue over and over again. So it's really tough in those moments to be like, okay, we need to make this plan. But yes, do not fight fires. You're not doing this in the moment. You're in a snow globe of stress. So are they. And we're trying to plan something. We're trying to figure out what's going on. And understanding their prefrontal cortex is not developed. So we have to think about triggers. We have to think about what can we do differently, and then sit down with them calmly to work on that. And that's what I do with parents. I help them with that coaching, because for me to build rapport with a child, to be like, why aren't you listening to your kids? I'm not going to, why aren't you listening to your parents? I'm not going to do that. It's up to the parent to be able to do that, but it can be tough, especially when you have a child that says, I don't know, leave me alone. I don't want to talk about it. I know this is a struggle. I'm trying not to get into the shame and blame, but every morning we struggle. Homework is such a tough thing. What is going on? What are the barriers? Help me understand. What would be helpful? How can we work on this? And then you're building that rapport. You're helping them feel heard. When they feel heard, they calm down. They're more likely to do problem solving. So we're trying to get ahead of it. But I know we don't feel like it, because sometimes that's more work, and sometimes it doesn't work. And we have to repeat ourselves. So we just think, forget it. I'm tired.
Yeah. So you did touch on this a little bit, but I want to do a little bit of a deeper dive with children, especially when we're talking about ADHD. There are certain things when they grow that end up being kind of the strengths that come with the contrast of the things that make them struggle when they're younger. Can we touch on some of the kind of common things that we can look for? Because again, you talk a lot about building those skills. So just, I think another thing as parents for us to be cognizant of.
So you're asking, what are those positives of having an ADHD diagnosis?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think with an ADHD child, they're hyper-focused, right? So when they are into something, they're into something, right? They have that hyperactivity. They are not those kids that are on the couch that you're trying to get out of the door. They are driven, especially if they like something, they are driven. They're 150% in. Parents will say, because they're hypersensitive, they are super compassionate, they're loving, they're caring children. And so there's a lot of positives. The ADHD should not be their label. It's not who they are. I'm not ADHD. I am Michelle and I have ADHD, or I am Michelle and I have anxiety, but it doesn't define who I am. And we can build on those strengths. Just like in parents, you may be better at validating your child, and the other parent might be better at organization and getting the homework done. So let's work together on that and build each other's strengths up. But having a diagnosis of ADHD can be scary. What does this mean for their future? But there's a lot of successful people out there that have ADHD. And this is where we need to talk more about mental illness, because there's such a huge stigma on mental illness. If you have diabetes, people wrap around you. You have depression, you have anxiety, you have ADHD, not a big deal, right? Or it's just an excuse. Everybody gets diagnosed with ADHD. What do you have to worry about? Well, you don't have anxiety. You're fine. You're just coddling them. Not helpful for anybody, and lots of judgment. So having those conversations, seeing some of the barriers, but also let's look at the other pieces of my child that have nothing to do with ADHD, but then also the pieces of the ADHD that they're more, when they get hyper-focused and passionate and they're like hyper and they've got all that energy, that's a good thing too, right? Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. You said this when I was listening earlier, and I guess it goes back to what you were talking about before Brian asked that last question, and it's, they aren't giving you a hard time, they are having a hard time. Mm-hmm. And just how you were talking about that, right? I think that's so important to remember. Parents, teachers, family, daycare providers, all that, it is something that they are dealing with, and probably afterwards feel really remorseful that, they cause stress, they cause tears, they cause this, that, and the next thing, right? So yes. Very good to remember.
Yeah, and that's that mindset shift for us, to try to look at it from that angle, trying to understand that their brain is under construction, that they are trying their best, that they're not doing this on purpose just to make us angry. They're not going to school to see how often can the teacher's head pop off, or can I get to the principal's office 3 times instead of 4 times today? They're not doing this on purpose, but it comes across that way. Especially parents will get frustrated, and it's like Tuesday and Thursday you did well, and somehow on Saturday you can't figure this out. Brain is under construction. We are human, but you're so frustrated and you see such big consistent emotions or behaviors, that's why we have to get ahead of it, figure out the triggers, figure out the skills, and create some structure and a plan, because they do really well with structure and a plan. And the best therapy is love. They just need to know that you're there, that you love them, and you're separating the behavior from the child.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Now, Tanya's alluded to a webinar that she listened to that you've done recently. Just wanted to give you a chance to let us know about anything that you might be working on in the near future that we can watch out for, and just kind of what to expect moving forward.
Yeah. So I did recently just do ADHD and intense emotions, which was leading to my on-demand programs. So I do have a program for ADHD, and it's on demand for parents, and it's nurturing their superpower, parenting ADHD with understanding. And it's taken from all my years of experience. So over 15 years experience working in mental health, for pediatric mental health. And I work with parents one-on-one, and I see the consistent questions, the consistent concerns. So I've added all of those in my modules. And anxiety is another one that will be coming up, because I see a lot of struggle with anxiety as well. And as a child life specialist, I do have an inside kind of view of what it's like to handle a child that has chronic illness as well. Mm-hmm. So I created a little mini program for children, exceptional children, and how to parent and how not to burn out, because that is a different level of parenting as well, when you've got to worry about dialysis or getting to all these appointments and, advocating for your child. And then you've got maybe neurotypical children or children that don't have chronic illness, and trying to make it all work. So I created a mini program for that as well.
Oh, that's great.
Mm-hmm. All right. And obviously not to steal any business from from your programs that you've created, but the one thing that you mentioned there that kind of is interesting to me is just the burnout piece. Like, what are, just at a high level, a couple of things that you'd be willing to share just to help parents in any of these scenarios avoid the burnout?
Yes. Well, that's how I started off in this, right? I wrote a book called I Quit. Oh, wait, I'm the Mom. And it is all, yes, right? I know we want to quit, but we can't. So essentially self-care is so important. And I incorporate self-care and talking about burnout in all of my programs, and even one-on-one with parents, because burnout is a cycle, right? And where are we thriving or are we surviving? And when we grew up, probably our parents did not hold space for our emotion. I can, little boys, if we do stereotypical stuff, little boys, you shouldn't be crying, girls, stop acting that way, you're fine, just push through it. And it's just like, no one is allowed to have emotion. Emotion is okay. But then I don't learn how to deal with my emotion. I don't learn how to step off of this Ferris wheel of stress. I can't ask for help, because asking for help is that I'm a failure, or I'll be judged. And there's so many, of that it's wine o'clock for all moms. Why? And having a glass of wine is okay, but why are we glorifying numbing out the pain? It just becomes about numbing and avoiding versus what really is going on. Where is the support? Let's normalize this, and what are the steps moving forward? But we're just spinning our wheels because we don't feel supported. We feel like a failure. We don't know where to get help. And sometimes the help doesn't fit what we really need. So burnout is something to acknowledge, and it doesn't motivate us to consistently do the things that we need to do, because we're tired. But children learn what they live. So if you are not taking care of your emotion, if you are not saying, this is what I need, this is what I need to set boundaries myself, children learn this is how we deal with emotion. This is how we deal with stress. I don't want to put more pressure or judgment on parents at all, but I think it's just about self-awareness and normalizing and knowing what you need to move forward. Yeah.
Oh, great. Really good conversation. And I know it's going to be helpful for everybody who listens.
I hope so. Yes. Thank you for having me.
No, Michelle, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on. Again, the links are in the description below for anybody who wants to learn more. And Again, for everyone who watched or listened to this episode, thank you for letting us disrupt your everyday.
Thanks for listening to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. For more ways to listen, connect with us on social media. To be a guest or to partner with us, check out our link tree at Disrupt the Everyday. Join us next time for more ways to disrupt the everyday.